and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Sam Santiago. I'm your host for the Passion and Purpose Online Summit. And now we'd like to take a moment to introduce our next guest speaker, Soneka Kamukusa. Soneka is the Regional Director for Education at the Porter and Chester Institute. He's got a lot more information regarding his background, skills, and experience that he will be sharing with us, but I can assure you that there's a really great information coming up. So we definitely are looking forward to listening to what Soneka has to share with us. So Soneka, thank you very much for joining the online summit. We're talking about passion and purpose today and over the next 4 days. And the audience is just dying to find out a little bit more about how you found your passion and how do you pursue your purpose. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully you can hear me clearly. There's a bit of an echo. I think I can hear you. I can hear.
We can hear you okay, Soneka.
No, you know what happened? I realized that I have two computers in front of me, and the other computer had you going at the same time. So,
okay.
So I was wondering where you were coming from. I'm looking at my other computer. So a little bit of background information I think is important in terms of who I am and my background and my professional background. So I will fill that in. I was recently I was the Vice President of Education here at Porter and Chester, and in terms of a chronology of where I came from, I initially graduated with a degree in hospitality administration, which is restaurant and hotel management, out of Boston University. And through my through the time that I left school, I kind of found that I migrated over to the technology field. And so I found that I was very interested in technology and hospitality. And so I started working with an organization called Microsystems. And if anybody knows Microsystems, they are an organization that makes the POS systems, which are the point of sale systems that you use in restaurants. And I was fascinated. Of course, I had the restaurant background with regards to school, and I kind of got into that, and that was a lot of fun. Then an old professor of mine from one of the from school, actually Newberry College, called me back and asked me if I would help to teach continuing education classes in the hospitality field, and I decided to do that. So I used to teach these continuing education classes in hospitality administration, whether it was front desk management, computers in the hospitality industry, things like that. And it lit a little fire in me for teaching, and educating. And so that was my first kind of interaction with, working with students, working with people. Left Boston after working with another organization called Au Bon Pain, which is now Panera Bread, and I worked at their help desk, of course, doing hospitality, restaurant computer systems in the back. Anytime the computers would have issues in the middle of the night with their close, we would be the people who would work through that. And you're going to bear with me because I'm going to tell the story in a nice roundabout way to show you how I kind of ended up where I am. Moved to Maryland, came down to Maryland, was working in a 24/7 help desk arena where we dealt with multiple, it was an outsourced place, so we dealt with multiple restaurants, multiple retail places, and I did hospitality, restaurant, computer systems, again, troubleshooting what was happening with closes, troubleshooting POS systems, computer systems, etc., etc. I saw an ad in the newspaper for a part-time help desk instructor, and it was at a place called Lincoln Technical Institute in Columbia, Maryland. And I applied. I got the part-time job, so now I was working, Lord knows, 24 hours. I exaggerate. I was working like 17, 16-hour days, working the job that I was working at the help desk, as well as my now teaching. Lo and behold, that took its toll on me, and eventually I was offered a full-time job working at Lincoln Tech as a help desk instructor full-time. And that's all she wrote. From that point, 1999, I became a full-time faculty member and instructor at Lincoln Tech, moved into administration, became a supervisor in the IT department, went from a supervisor, moved to a different organization, became a director of education, moved from that organization to a different organization as the academic dean, found a love for proprietary education, but really at its core for me was the connection with young people and the ability to shape their lives. You know, the opportunity to deposit something in somebody's life and make a difference. And what my passion became was not so much just the industry that we were in terms of education, but it really tied into what do we need to do and what do I need to do as an individual that will help change and shape young people so that their tomorrows are better, whether it is, you know, in a professional sense, whether it's in a social sense, whether it's in a cultural sense. I think that that's what I started to get out of my experience of being an educator. So as I grew in the administrative sense, as becoming a director and becoming a leader and owning my own organization, my own company where we did consulting and staff development, it really became about equipping people with tools to really feed into young people's lives and help them change their futures. So I as I transitioned into CEO of Moses Steps, and then I got the opportunity to be vice president of Porter and Chester. At its core, I was doing a lot of other things. I worked with a foundation called the Jacaranda Center for Family and Youth Development. And what we did is we held a lot of parenting workshops. We worked with youth. I held a youth huddle for young junior high school men, high school, I call them men really, but high school boys and junior high school boys, and really transition them into what we call transition into adulthood. And, sitting with them and talking about just their perspective about life, culture, religion, how they felt about themselves, and really discussing male vulnerability. So in establishing my passion, and working to get to a place where I had to identify for myself what are the things in me that really feed me, I developed a new vehicle that we actually have right now, which I'm still working on, and I have some very good people working with me, one of them being Bambi Weevil, is Man Talk. And what Man Talk has evolved to be is literally a kindling and a flame, a growing fire out of my passion, which is plugging into the lives of youth, in this particular case, young men, to develop them into wholesome and full adults. And why that has happened is I was raised by a single mother who tried her best to raise two boys, 2 years apart. And as I grew older and I started to do a lot of work on myself and try to transition myself into being adult, I started to look at the things that I needed to make me a more wholesome man and the things that I was missing. And I share this because in my passion, really, which is working with youth and developing vehicles so that we can teach young men about vulnerability, teach young men about their role in the world culture, and what we need to do as human beings to allow ourselves not only to live a more wholesome life, physically, spiritually, but also to really have a social component that allows us to communicate better. In my experience, I have intersected and interacted with many young men who have been taught, be tough, be strong, don't be a punk. All these things that don't allow us to express our feelings, don't allow us to be emotionally open, don't allow us to be sensitive to ourselves and gentle with ourselves enough to appreciate our humanness. And I was one of those kids. I was raised by the neighborhood guys. I didn't have a father in the house. And not to say that, I believe that, people who are raised without fathers all experience this. But I know that I had no male positive role models. I did have male role models, but there were guys out there who were teaching me all the wrong things. And they were plugging into me the things that did not help me to grow into a man. So as I grew up, I grew up with a set of skills which were completely useless. Completely useless to me as an adult. And I have spent a lot of my adult life, I wrote a book. I have a book which is coming out. It's called In the Shadow of the Mountain. And really it's a book about mother enmeshment, which really is being raised as a young man who identified so much with my mother and identified so much with my mother's needs that I and my brother became surrogate spouses, so to speak, to my mother because I was so sensitized to knowing how to make her happy. And as a child, what you're trying to do is you look for affirmation and validation however you can. Sometimes in a very negative environment, sometimes in environments that are unhealthy. And I am now in the process of growing up as an adult, trying to undo some of the things that I see happen to me in my childhood. And people ask me all the time, why are you so effective with young men and how in your work with young men? And I tell them I simply share with young men the things that I wish somebody had told me growing up. And so my passion through education, through my education and through the things that I'm doing have really gotten me to a point where I realize that what I truly I'm aching for is to create a dialogue for young men about authentic manhood. And what does that mean? And that is just such a wide and incredibly broad statement. But I truly believe that the key areas are in and around, and I wrote down, some 5 things which I think for me are key things I think I concentrate on and I have been looking at for myself, and I look at when I work with young men, and I call them self meditations. The first one is nurturing, the ability to nurture yourself. And I think that for me, in developing my passion and looking at how I needed to get to where I needed to get to, and how I needed to continue to just work on that flame inside was about nurturing, about understanding how I nurture my own dreams. How do I treat myself? How do I, assess my needs? What do I need to do? What kind of a mindset do I need to take on in order for me to accept that I need to be treated a certain way. I need to feel a certain way. And, are those legitimate feelings and so on and so forth. And these are not dialogues that are normal dialogues to have because you have to be conscious and you have to be living consciously in order to have them. The next one for me was being vulnerable. That is anti what we are taught and what I was taught. If anything, I was taught, be tough. Be strong. Don't let them see your tears. Don't be a punk. Everything. I give an example to parents. I say, I say, well, if you had, because I'm a youth coach, I coach youth soccer as well. So I used to give an example. I said, if your 15-year-old boy was playing, in a soccer game, and you saw him get tackled, and he falls down on the field, and he starts crying, like just crying, bawling his head off. I said, what would you do? Well, in a room full of like 20 parents, you had the occasion of some of the female parents saying, well, I would run onto the field and I would go and check on my baby. Well, bar none, the majority of the parents went, I'd be telling him to get up, get up, don't be a punk, come on, get up, that kind of stuff. And of course, I was like, oh yeah. I said, well, what about if that was your 15-year-old daughter? And everybody in the room was like, oh no, I'd be out there. I'd be checking on my daughter. So that's the environment that, I see myself, and I recognize the environment that I was raised in. I was raised in an environment which told me to ignore my feelings. Ignore your feelings, ignore your pain. You're not hurt. Authentic manhood for you is being tough, make money, provide for your family. You know what? You don't have to spend a whole bunch of time with your kids. As long as you're providing, as long as you're doing this, that's authentic manhood. And that's just it's a crazy message. So being vulnerable and being open and understanding that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to want to share. It's okay to have those those dialogues. The other thing was submitting to the demands of your dreams. I fully believe that you can find yourself X amount of years down the road, having worked for different companies, having done a lot of things for people, made people a lot of money, and not once stepping into what your real shape is. And for me, I think that at the root of that is not being conscious of what the demands are to work towards your dreams. When you get a job and they give you a job description, it's very clear. You know what, Sam, you're going to, when you come in the morning, I expect you to send 16 emails to this. I expect you to check that. Here's a little check-off sheet that you do. We have that. And many of us don't do that with our own dreams. What is your roadmap for your dream? What are the checkoffs that you need to do? And, what are your short-term, mid-term, long-term goals? Because in reality, you have to nurture your dream just as badly as you would do anything else. And for me, I realized I wasn't doing that. I wasn't sitting down and coming up with strategies. I had all these things in my head. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do this. But I didn't sit down and submit to the demands which said, how much time are you going to put into it? Yes, you need to have a job that pays the bills, that pays for the car, that does this, but you are looking to do these things. And the funny thing is, some of your dreams may not be things that make you money today. Your passion may not be something that makes you money today. But the incredible thing about a passion is that when you work and you live and you dream and you exist in your passion, it fulfills you so much that the karma, I believe the positive karma of the world starts to congregate around you. And you know what? Monetizing your passion becomes easier. That's why I envy basketball players. I envy football players, because Lord knows how I'd love to be paid to play soccer. I would have loved to be a professional soccer player, because you know what? They get paid to play a sport that they would play even if they weren't being paid. And that's how I feel about, where I just love talking to young men and talking to them about life. And I realized that that's my passion. That's that, and that just young people. And if I can make a young man a better husband, a better friend, a better son, then I have done enough to leave at least my little mark on earth. And that's been critical for me. That was point number 3. Point number 4 is being gentle with myself. I know that I've been very hard on myself, whether it's physically, mentally, because the demands of society, as a man, as a woman, And I apologize. I'm talking as a man, and I don't want any women on the call to assume that this is just it is just concentrated on young men. What I do is I found my niche, but it of course it transcends. As long as when you're touching one human being, you touch others. But I truly believe that we are very hard on ourselves. Society tells us that there's certain things we have to get. There's certain marks we have to reach. If you're a man or a woman and you don't have a house, then you haven't achieved. If you don't have a certain car, then you haven't achieved this. If you don't have this and that, and we become such a consumerist society. Even our health. If I don't look like I've got nice biceps and nice pecs and all this kind of stuff, there are all these demands that um, for lack of a better word, artificial demands that our culture and our society places on people, that if you're not gentle with yourself, you will always be comparing yourself or trying to achieve things which are really not in your shape. They're really not things that you should even be attempting. It's like being 50 years old and somehow we're not supposed to old gracefully, Sam. What we're supposed to do at 50, we're still supposed to be muscular guys, and we're supposed to have six packs. We're not supposed to have fat bellies, but all that is fighting age, and those are the things that we're not gentle with ourselves on. Artificial beauty, and I've learned to start to become gentle with my mistakes, gentle with myself. I have shortcomings. I have, I'm not 6'5". I'm not 280 pounds of muscle, but God made me fearfully and wonderfully, and and I believe in that gentleness being passed on to younger people. We need to teach our people to accept themselves however they are, and then work with what they have because they're unique in their purpose. But if you're not told those things as you grow up, if there's nobody beside you to give you those messages, you will always measure yourself against something which is not measurable. Because society is always throwing us, media throw us these images which are fake images which nobody looks like. No real people look like that. No real people do those things. Everybody's rich in the media, or or things are always one extreme or the other. There's no in between. And in reality, there is an in between. And the in between is the rest of us in the world who are existing and trying to exist and make a great life for ourselves. That's what it is. We're not all Beyonce. We're not all Jay-Z. We all won't be Michael Jordan. We all won't be LeBron James. But we will be the people who go to watch LeBron James and give him some of the money that he gets. And that's okay. And the other thing that I've done for myself, which was point number 5 in working towards and developing my passion, was really seeking healing. Looking at the things that I needed to heal in myself, the pains and the clarity that I needed to get around my shortcomings. And it's very hard to heal somebody else and work to plug into people's lives if you haven't really done and you're not doing a whole bunch of work on yourself. And so for me, I'm constantly working at doing self-healing, and assessing whether I have places in me that hurt, because what you can find yourself doing if you're not working on self-healing and you're not constantly evolving your spiritual nature and evolving your cultural nature and your social nature and your mind, is you'll be giving off energy that is not authentic. And by that I mean you fake your way through life, and you fake your way through your interactions with people. And I think that the more whole you can be as a human being, the better you are at your passion. Your passion requires a whole you. And while you're working on your passion, you need to try to be as whole as you can, because that helps to develop the authenticity that you need in order for you to truly, truly have an impact on the people that you're trying to reach out to. So I don't know if we have more time, Sam, or if I've covered enough.
Thank you, Sonika. Actually, we're right at 3:29 p.m. Central, or 4:29, I should say, p.m. Eastern. So
I think I'm losing you.